Seniors, I need to tell you something that your cardiologist has probably never said to you directly during a routine checkup. And the reason they haven't said it is not because they don't know. It's because medicine moves slowly, and most doctors are still operating on guidelines that were written for a completely different body, a younger body. Here it is. The way you are drinking water right now, today, could be quietly damaging your heart. Not the water itself, the way you are drinking it, the speed, the temperature, the timing, the quantity at once. And if you are over 60, these details are not minor. They are the difference between a heart that functions under control and a heart that is working under constant hidden stress every single day. And before you think this is some exaggeration, let me give you a number that stopped me cold when I first read it. According to the American Heart Association, the incidence of cardiovascular disease in adults between 60 and 79 years old sits at approximately 75%. 3 out of every 4 people in that age range are already dealing with some form of cardiovascular condition, and an overwhelming majority of them are still drinking water the same way they drank it at 35. Large glasses, ice cold, first thing in the morning, right before bed, all at once. And cardiologists who specialize in geriatric cardiac health are now raising a consistent and urgent warning about exactly this combination. What happens inside your heart when you drink water the wrong way after 60 is something that most seniors never see coming because it doesn't announce itself loudly. There is no dramatic chest pain, no single alarming moment. It is subtle, cumulative, and deeply connected to changes in your aging cardiovascular system that nobody sat you down and explained. That is what this video is going to do. I am going to walk you through exactly what happens inside the body of a person over 60 when they drink water incorrectly. I am going to show you the specific physiological mechanisms that change after 60 and why your heart responds so differently now compared to 20 years ago. I am going to name the exact mistakes, and I promise you, several of them are things you believe are completely healthy, even virtuous. And at the end, I am going to give you the precise adjustments that cardiologists actually recommend. The specific strategies that protect the aging heart without reducing your total hydration. Stay with me through this entire video because the mistake I reveal in the second half, the one connected to nighttime hydration, is responsible for a chain of events that most seniors never connect to their water drinking habits at all. And by the time I explain it fully, you will understand why it matters more than almost anything else in this video. But first, a quick question for the community. What time of day do you usually drink your largest amount of water? Morning, afternoon, or evening? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and it helps me understand what the people watching this channel actually need. Now, let us start from the very beginning, because to understand why water becomes dangerous after 60, you first need to understand exactly what happens to the heart and the cardiovascular system as it ages. Most people assume the heart simply slows down with age. The reality is considerably more specific and more important than that. After the age of 60, 3 structural and physiological changes occur inside the cardiovascular system that fundamentally alter how the heart responds to sudden changes in fluid volume. And when you understand these 3 changes, everything else in this video will make perfect sense. Change number 1, the heart muscle becomes stiffer. This is called diastolic dysfunction, and it is remarkably common in older adults. So common that many cardiologists now consider it a near universal feature of the aging heart rather than a disease. What diastolic dysfunction means in practical terms is that the lower chambers of your heart, the ventricles, have increasing difficulty relaxing fully between beats. When the heart cannot relax properly between beats, it cannot fill efficiently with the volume of blood that is flowing into it. And when blood volume suddenly increases, which is exactly what happens when you drink a large glass of water rapidly, the already struggling heart is hit with an additional load it is not equipped to handle efficiently. The result can be felt: palpitations, a sensation of fluttering or heaviness in the chest, dizziness, a sudden awareness of your own heartbeat that wasn't there a moment ago. Most seniors who experience this after drinking water assume it is something else. They blame tiredness, or low blood sugar, or getting up too fast. Very few connect it to the large glass of water they just finished 30 seconds earlier. Change number 2, arterial stiffness increases. The blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart also lose elasticity with age. This means that with each heartbeat, the heart is now pushing blood into a system that resists rather than accommodates. It is the cardiovascular equivalent of trying to push air into a rigid pipe instead of a flexible tube. The resistance goes up. The pressure the heart must generate goes up with it. And when you suddenly introduce a large volume of fluid into this system, increasing the total circulating blood volume abruptly, the pressure spike that results can be pronounced. Change number 3, the kidneys slow down. After 60, the kidney's ability to filter and excrete fluid decreases. Studies published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society have documented that glomerular filtration rate, the measure of how effectively the kidneys process fluid, declines by an average of approximately 1% per year after age 40, and this decline accelerates after 65. What this means practically is that when a senior drinks a large quantity of water at once, the body cannot process and eliminate that volume quickly. The fluid remains in circulation longer. The cardiovascular system carries that elevated load for an extended period. Not just the few minutes that a young, healthy kidney would take to process it, but potentially for an hour or more. These 3 changes, a stiffer heart, stiffer vessels, and slower kidneys, combine to create a cardiovascular system that is exquisitely sensitive to sudden fluid volume shifts. A system that, as cardiologists who specialize in aging medicine describe it, needs gradual input rather than flooding. And here is the critical thing that nobody tells seniors. These changes are not extreme. These are normal aging changes. They are happening quietly in the bodies of millions of perfectly healthy, functional adults over 60. You do not need to have a diagnosed heart condition for this to apply to you. You do not need to be on medication. The stiffening happens in everyone. The question is only whether you are making it worse by drinking water the way you did at 35. Here is something that surprises almost everyone when they first hear it. Thirst sensation diminishes with age. This is not a minor quirk. It is a documented physiological shift with serious cardiovascular consequences. Research from the National Institute on Aging has confirmed that older adults experience a significantly reduced sense of thirst, even when their bodies are clinically dehydrated. This means that a senior can be running meaningfully low on fluid and feel perfectly fine. No dryness, no craving for water, nothing. And then, when the thirst signal finally arrives, or when they remember they haven't drunk much, the natural response is to compensate, to drink a large quantity quickly, to try to catch up. This creates what cardiovascular specialists describe as a fluid roller coaster. Extended periods of underhydration followed by rapid large volume intake. Then back to underhydration, then another rapid intake. And what a fluid roller coaster does to the aging cardiovascular system is not subtle. During the dehydration phase, blood becomes slightly more viscous, thicker. The heart works harder to move it. Blood pressure can fluctuate. The risk of clot formation increases marginally. And when suddenly a large volume of plain water enters this system, diluting the blood rapidly, expanding circulating volume abruptly, the heart receives a dual shock. First, the mechanical load of increased volume. Second, the sudden dilution of electrolytes that regulate the heart's own electrical system. This electrolyte dilution is more important than most people realize, and it connects directly to the most dangerous and least discussed consequence of incorrect water drinking in seniors, a condition called hyponatremia. Hyponatremia, low blood sodium. Let me give you the numbers on this because they are extraordinary. A study examining hyponatremia in elderly hospitalized patients found that the prevalence among those over 65 years of age was 27.55%. More than 1 in 4 hospitalized elderly patients were found to have dangerously low sodium levels, and the in-hospital mortality rate associated with hyponatremia in elderly populations in multiple studies sits at approximately 11 to 27%. Dramatically higher than for elderly patients without the condition. Hyponatremia in seniors is not rare, it is not exotic, it is not something that only happens to the frail and bedridden. It is happening to ambulatory, independent, otherwise healthy seniors who are drinking too much plain water too quickly, particularly those who are also taking common medications. And here is where it gets specific in a way that should genuinely concern you. The medications most strongly associated with dramatically elevated hyponatremia risk in the elderly include thiazide diuretics, blood pressure medications. If you are over 60 and you are taking a blood pressure medication, you need to understand this clearly. Research published in the medical literature has found that age over 70 years is associated with a 3.9-fold increase in hyponatremia risk in patients on thiazide diuretics, nearly 4 times the risk. And when a senior on these medications drinks large amounts of plain water rapidly, attempting to stay healthy, attempting to follow the drink more water advice they have received their whole lives, the kidneys, already slowed by age and already affected by the medication, struggle to maintain sodium balance. The sodium in the blood dilutes, it drops, and what follows is a cascade of symptoms that are frequently misdiagnosed or missed entirely. The early symptoms of hyponatremia are maddeningly nonspecific: mild confusion, excessive sleepiness, unusual fatigue, headache, a vague sense of weakness. These are symptoms that families attribute to aging. Doctors sometimes attribute to medication side effects. Nobody immediately asks, how much water has this person been drinking? As sodium continues to fall, and in vulnerable individuals, this progression can happen faster than most people imagine. The symptoms escalate: balance problems, difficulty walking, nausea, and in severe cases, seizures and loss of consciousness. This is not a theoretical risk. A study examining 1 year of hospitalized elderly patients found that hyponatremia was associated with significantly higher rates of falls and fractures at admission, independent of all other factors. The connection between water drinking habits, sodium dilution, and falls in the elderly is real, documented, and dangerous. And almost none of the seniors experiencing it understand where it started. There is one specific variable in how water is consumed that cardiologists flag repeatedly and that almost no general health advice addresses: temperature. When cold water, particularly very cold or ice water, is consumed rapidly, it triggers a response in the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the primary parasympathetic nerve of the body. It runs from the brainstem down through the chest and into the abdomen, and it has a direct regulatory influence on heart rate. Rapid cold water intake stimulates the vagus nerve in a way that can cause an abrupt drop in heart rate. For most young, healthy people, this is completely inconsequential. The effect is mild and momentary, but in an older adult, particularly one with already present diastolic dysfunction, arterial stiffness, or any degree of pre-existing arrhythmia, the story is different. The cold water signal reaches the vagus nerve. The nerve fires. Heart rate drops suddenly. Simultaneously, the cold water causes vasoconstriction. The blood vessels narrow in response to the temperature drop, which spikes blood pressure briefly. The heart is now dealing with a sudden rate decrease and a sudden pressure increase at the same moment. In a healthy 30-year-old cardiovascular system, these competing signals cancel out without incident. In a stiffer, less adaptive aging system, they can produce palpitations, a momentary sense of chest heaviness, dizziness, or cold sweat. Cardiologists who specialize in cardiac arrhythmias in elderly populations consistently document cold water as a known, if underappreciated, vagal trigger. In those with pre-existing arrhythmia conditions, particularly atrial fibrillation, cold fluid intake has been documented as a trigger for symptom episodes. Research published in the American Journal of Physiology confirmed that water ingestion activates the autonomic nervous system and induces acute hemodynamic changes, and that these effects are amplified in individuals with autonomic dysfunction, a condition that becomes more prevalent with age. The practical implication is straightforward. Room temperature water is not a minor preference. For an older adult, it is a cardiovascular decision. Let us talk about what happens in the morning, because the morning hydration pattern that most seniors follow is, from a cardiological standpoint, one of the most stressful things they do to their heart all day. The typical morning pattern looks like this. You wake up, you have not had water for 6, 7, 8 hours. You know you are supposed to hydrate, you feel dry, so you go to the kitchen and you drink a full glass of water, sometimes two, sometimes immediately after one another. Cold, because the glass was sitting out or because you use tap water that runs cold first. Here is what that sequence does to the aging cardiovascular system. After 8 hours of sleep, your circulating blood volume is already slightly reduced from the overnight fast. Your blood pressure upon waking follows what cardiologists call the morning surge, a natural documented increase in systolic blood pressure that occurs in the first 1 to 2 hours after waking. This morning surge exists because the body is activating the sympathetic nervous system to prepare for the day's activities. Blood pressure rises, heart rate increases. The cardiovascular system is in a state of heightened activation. And into this already activated, already surging system, you immediately pour a large cold volume of water. The blood volume jumps abruptly. the already raised blood pressure receives an additional mechanical push from the increased circulating volume. The cold water fires the vagus nerve, creating a competing signal that challenges the heart's rhythm regulation at the exact moment the system is already managing the morning pressure surge. For seniors with hypertension, and the statistics are significant here, more than 70% of adults over 65 in the United States have diagnosed hypertension. This morning combination is a genuine cardiac stressor that occurs every single day, unrecognized, unaddressed, and almost entirely preventable. The cardiological recommendation consistently is gradual morning rehydration, not a large glass the moment the feet hit the floor. A small glass, 4 to 6 ounces, followed by a period of gentle movement and another small glass 15 to 20 minutes later. The cardiovascular system in the morning needs to be eased into fluid volume restoration, not flooded. Here is the part of this video I told you to wait for, and I want to walk through it carefully because it involves a chain of events that begins with a glass of water before bed and ends in a place that will genuinely surprise you. Most seniors drink water close to bedtime. This is considered virtuous. The reasoning is sensible on the surface. I haven't drunk enough today. I don't want to be dehydrated overnight. My doctor says to stay hydrated. But what actually happens when a senior drinks a large volume of water within 1 to 2 hours of lying down involves 3 separate dangerous mechanisms operating simultaneously. Mechanism 1, the lying down blood volume shift. When the body transitions from vertical to horizontal, gravity stops pulling blood toward the legs. Approximately 300 to 500 milliliters of blood that was pooled in the lower extremities redistributes upward, back toward the chest, back toward the heart. This is a normal physiological process that happens every night. In a young heart, it is managed seamlessly. In an aging heart with diastolic dysfunction, remember that difficulty relaxing between beats? This sudden return of blood volume to the central circulation is already a challenge. Add to that the large volume of water just consumed before lying down. Now the central blood volume increase from the positional change combines with the volume increase from the recent fluid intake. The heart, already stiff, already managing a drainage system from the legs, receives a compounded volume load at the exact moment it is supposed to be resting and doing its overnight repair work. Mechanism 2, the nocturnal cardiac overload and its symptoms. This compounded nighttime volume load in an aging heart can produce a specific and deeply distressing set of symptoms during the night. Shortness of breath that wakes the person from sleep, what cardiologists call nocturnal dyspnea, a sense of chest pressure, frequent awakening with a rapid or uncomfortable heartbeat, swelling in the legs and ankles that is more pronounced by morning. Many seniors who experience these symptoms attribute them to age, to stress, to anxiety, to just a bad night. Very few think back to the 2 glasses of water they drank before bed. The temporal connection is real, and it is documented in the clinical literature on heart failure management, where nighttime fluid restriction is a standard cardiological recommendation. Mechanism 3, the fall chain, and this is where it becomes life-threatening. Here is the mechanism that most people never hear connected to water drinking, and it is the most dangerous part of this entire picture. Large nighttime fluid intake leads to increased nocturnal urination. The kidneys are processing that extra volume. The bladder fills. The person wakes up at 2 in the morning, or 3, or 4, needing to urinate urgently. They get out of bed, and this is where the statistics become genuinely alarming. When a person stands suddenly from a lying position after sleeping, blood pressure drops momentarily as the cardiovascular system scrambles to push blood back up against gravity. In a healthy young body, this adjustment happens in under a second. In an elderly body with the arterial stiffness and autonomic regulation changes we have described, this adjustment is slower, sometimes significantly slower. The result is a brief but dangerous window of low blood pressure upon standing. A condition called orthostatic hypotension. Research published in the American Academy of Family Physicians Journal found that orthostatic hypotension is associated with up to a 50% increase in relative risk of all-cause mortality, not just fall risk, all-cause mortality. A separate analysis published in the journal Circulation found it to be a significant independent predictor of death in elderly men, persisting even after adjustment for all other cardiovascular risk factors. And in the middle of the night, when a senior rushes to the bathroom because their kidneys are processing extra fluid volume, orthostatic hypotension is far more likely than during the day. The brain has just been in sleep physiology. Regulatory reflexes are slower. The lights are off. The floor may be unfamiliar in the dark. This is the sequence. Water before bed, increased nocturnal urination, sudden nighttime standing, orthostatic hypotension, fall, hip fracture, hospitalization, complications. It is not a dramatic sequence. It does not announce itself, but it plays out in hospitals and emergency rooms every single night in seniors who had absolutely no idea that how they drank water was part of the chain. There is one more mechanism in this picture that is almost never discussed, and it connects the nighttime overhydration we just described to the hyponatremia danger from earlier in a way that creates a compounding risk. When a senior drinks a large volume of plain water rapidly, particularly at night, and particularly if they are on diuretic medications for blood pressure or heart conditions, the sodium concentration in their blood can drop by morning without them feeling any dramatic symptoms. Mild chronic, low-grade hyponatremia. Research has found the prevalence of hyponatremia in elderly hospitalized patients consistently sits between 18 and 27.5%. That is not a small number. That is a common condition. And the insidious thing about mild hyponatremia is that its symptoms are invisible enough to be dismissed as fatigue, as age, as a foggy morning. But inside the brain and the heart, even mild sodium reduction is doing something measurable. The electrical conduction system of the heart, the system that coordinates the timing of each heartbeat, depends on sodium. When sodium drops, the heart's electrical stability decreases. The risk of arrhythmia edges up. The risk of atrial fibrillation in particular, already dramatically elevated in adults over 65, increases with electrolyte imbalances. And in the muscles, including the heart muscle, low sodium contributes to weakness, to fatigue, to reduced contractile efficiency. The heart that is already stiff and working harder than it did 20 years ago is now also electrically destabilized by the very hydration habit that the senior believed was protecting them. This is the full picture. This is what cardiologists see in the data and what most seniors never hear explained in a connected way. Let me give you a real clinical picture. Not to frighten, but to make this concrete and human. Margaret is 71. She is active. She takes blood pressure medication. She does not smoke. She follows health advice carefully. For years, she has been proud of her hydration habits. She drinks 8 to 10 glasses of water per day. She starts every morning with 2 large cold glasses immediately upon waking. She drinks a large glass before bed to make sure she doesn't dry out overnight. For the past 2 years, Margaret has been experiencing a cluster of symptoms that her doctor attributed to various causes. Morning dizziness that clears within 20 minutes of getting up, occasional palpitations that seem to come from nowhere, nighttime shortness of breath that wakes her once or twice a week, swollen ankles most mornings, fatigue that doesn't respond to sleep. And she fell once in the bathroom at 3 in the morning. She told her daughter she just lost her balance. What Margaret did not know, what nobody told her, was that her symptoms were forming a coherent cardiovascular picture. The morning dizziness. The aging cardiovascular system struggling with the sudden cold water blood volume surge against an already elevated morning blood pressure. The palpitations, vagal nerve stimulation from rapid cold water intake combining with mild electrolyte dilution. The nighttime shortness of breath, nocturnal cardiac volume overload from pre-sleep fluid intake combined with horizontal blood redistribution. The morning ankle swelling, the heart managing fluid excess overnight. The fall, orthostatic hypotension triggered by nighttime urination from pre-sleep fluid intake. All of it connected, all of it traceable to a hydration pattern that medicine told her was healthy. When a cardiologist familiar with geriatric cardiovascular physiology finally reviewed the full picture, the recommendations were not dramatic. Margaret did not need new medications. She did not need procedures. She needed her hydration pattern adjusted. Small sips in the morning rather than 2 immediate large glasses. Room temperature water instead of cold. No large fluid intake within 2 hours of sleep. Regular small amounts throughout the day instead of compensatory large volumes. A urine color target, pale yellow rather than clear, as a hydration guide that avoids both dehydration and overhydration. Within 3 weeks, the morning dizziness resolved. The palpitation episodes dropped significantly. The nighttime breathing disruptions almost entirely stopped. The ankle swelling reduced by morning. She has not fallen since. Same total water, completely different outcomes. Let me be precise. This is not general advice. This is the specific guidance that emerges from the cardiovascular physiology we have discussed, supported by clinical cardiological practice in geriatric populations. On morning hydration, begin with 4 to 6 ounces of water, roughly half a small glass, within the first 15 minutes of waking. Allow 30 minutes before consuming a larger amount. Never begin the morning with ice-cold water. Room temperature or slightly warm is cardiovascularly appropriate. The goal is gradual restoration of overnight fluid deficit, not rapid compensation. On temperature, room temperature water or slightly warmed water throughout the day. Cold water is not prohibited, but rapid intake of large volumes of cold water is a documented vagal and vasoconstrictive trigger in older adults. If you enjoy cold water, sip it slowly rather than drinking large volumes quickly. On timing and pacing, small amounts consistently throughout the day dramatically outperform large volumes at spaced intervals. The aging heart and kidney need gradual input. 4 to 6 ounces every 30 to 45 minutes is far more cardiovascularly appropriate than 2 large glasses twice a day. On nighttime hydration, no large fluid intake within 1 to 2 hours of sleep. This is a hard recommendation from geriatric cardiology. If you wake in the night thirsty, a few small sips is appropriate, not a full glass. The goal is to prevent the nocturnal volume load that triggers the chain of events we described: redistribution, overload, frequent urination, nighttime standing, and falls. On total volume, the generic 8 glasses a day recommendation has no individualized basis and can be actively harmful for seniors with heart failure, kidney disease, or hypertension. If you have any of these conditions, your fluid intake should be discussed with your cardiologist and individualized to your specific physiology. The in-hospital restriction for heart failure patients is often as low as 1 to 1.5 liters per day, a fraction of what general health advice promotes. More water is not always better. For the aging cardiovascular system, wiser water is the goal. On monitoring, the most practical daily guide for seniors is urine color. Pale yellow, not clear, not dark, represents appropriate hydration. Clear urine in an older adult, particularly one on diuretics, should prompt consideration of whether fluid intake is too high rather than being celebrated as optimal hydration. On symptoms that require medical evaluation, if you experience palpitations regularly after drinking water, dizziness upon standing, nighttime shortness of breath, unexplained ankle swelling, confusion or unusual fatigue in the morning, or any fall during nighttime bathroom trips. These are symptoms that connect to the cardiovascular picture we have discussed. They warrant direct conversation with your physician, and specifically a conversation about your hydration timing and pattern. Here is the truth that sits underneath everything in this video. Healthy aging is not about doing the same things you did at 40, but slightly more carefully. It is about understanding that your physiology has genuinely changed, and that strategies designed for a different body can produce different outcomes in the body you have now. The aging heart is not a failing heart. It is a changed heart. It has different needs, different tolerances, different vulnerabilities. And one of those vulnerabilities, one that directly affects millions of seniors every single day, is sensitivity to how fluid enters the system. The cardiologists who are tracking this data are consistent. The problem is not water. Water remains essential. Dehydration in older adults carries its own documented cardiovascular risks: thicker blood, elevated heart workload, higher risk of clot formation. Avoiding water is not the answer. Drinking water intelligently, with attention to speed, temperature, timing, and volume per intake, is the answer. The difference between those two approaches is the difference between Margaret before and Margaret after. Same fluid, transformed cardiovascular experience. You have spent your whole life being told to drink more water. Nobody told you how. Nobody told you what the aging cardiovascular system actually needs. And that gap in information, that space between what is generally recommended and what the physiology actually requires after 60, is where the damage quietly accumulates. Now you know. And knowing, as the data consistently shows, changes outcomes. If you found this valuable, please share it with someone you care about who is over 60. Not because this is frightening, but because this is solvable. These are not diseases. These are patterns. And patterns, unlike biology, can be changed starting today. I am Dr. James Carter. Thank you for watching. In our next video, I will be covering the 5 warning signs in your sleep that cardiologists say indicate the heart is under stress, and why most people dismiss every single one of them as normal aging. That video could be the most important thing you watch this year. I will see you there.